Hello, my name is Michael Novak, and welcome to Orchestra Novo Goes Small, a series of musical productions featuring members of Orchestra Novo in solo and chamber music performances. Today, we are at the family home of John Astaire, our principal percussionist. If there ever was a local boy makes good story, it sure is that tale of John Astaire. John grew up here in San Luis Obispo. He went to San Luis Obispo High and Cal Poly. And then he headed to the great conservatory in the Midwest, Indiana University, my old alma mater. John is so excellent at what he does, he could have a major career with any orchestra around the world, really. But he decided to come on home and be a part of our community again. And we're so delighted that he's back here, playing with all the groups in town, teaching at Cal Poly, and also working with the Youth Symphony. So he's come full circle, and we're sure glad he's here. John's put together an incredible program for this video project, everything from Bach to Roch. I have just one small request. More cowbell, please. John, to you.
I started playing the drums when I was 7 years old. The first thing I learned how to do was play all my rudiments on a snare drum, kind of like this one. It's the first thing every student learns, is how to play their rudiments. I never questioned where those rudiments came from, but they are the building blocks of everything that we do as percussionists. So it's a pretty fascinating history. No surprise that it dates back to Europe, and they're used in army, in the military, and they'd used to communicate information back and forth to each other, the drummers would. All of that got imported to the New World when the New World was settled. So we had, Germans, Swiss school, French school, British school, all of these peoples brought their drumming styles into America, and America sort of synthesized it. And we had all different manners of these traditions of drumming in our own snare drumming. I want to play for you guys a couple of examples of what this drumming is. Because when you were in the camps, in the army camps, the drummer, along with a fife player, would play signals to indicate when it was time to eat, when it was time to march, when it was time to do whatever. It was all done through drums. That's where the rudiments originated. The fife music that accompanied it is something that was sort of lost to drummers. We never realized that there was fife music accompanying it, but there is. And often it's taken from old traditional Irish folk melodies or British folk melodies and added to these rudiments. So first of all, I'm going to play for you guys the breakfast call. You would hear this at 7 a.m. in any colonial army camp, and then you know this was time to go eat breakfast. And it just has a 7-stroke roll, a couple of rough taps that we play, and this is what it would sound like. So at 7 a.m. in the morning, you'd hear the fifes and drums play that, and you knew it was time to go eat. 5 hours later, you'd get the dinner call, also known as the roast beef of Old England. So the drummers would all learn this pattern called roast beef. But we really never knew what that meant, other than it was time to eat. Well, there's a melody that goes along with it. Let's listen to what this melody sounds like. So there were many of these patterns and melodies that were played in the army camps. They also got translated into marches. Depending on the tempo of the march, the commanders could judge how soon it would take an army to get somewhere. Or if they wanted to go slower, they'd play a slower tempo. One of the most famous patriotic marches is Yankee Doodle. And that's an interesting story because Yankee Doodle was a term invented by the British as a derogatory term on the American colonists. And there's a rumor that the British Army played Yankee Doodle on the way to the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And after they were routed, the colonists in turn played Yankee Doodle to kind of stick it back at the British. So, it was a song made up to denigrate the American troops, but they took it as kind of a badge of honor and played Yankee Doodle. So these same rudiments find their way into Yankee Doodle. Let's listen to this now. So how does all this relate to classical music? Drums didn't start getting involved in classical music till, well, let's just say Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. There are examples before that, but really Beethoven broke the doors open. He added the Turkish drum section, though, that was bass drum, cymbals, and triangle. But a generation later, Hector Berlioz was putting drums in a lot of his music, and from then on, through the Romantic and early modern age, percussion section was well founded. An example I'd like to play for you now is from Rimsky-Korsakov. This piece for Scheherazade, late 19th century piece. It has a very famous snare drum solo in it that is basically these same rudiments. It's a 7-stroke roll. And he's playing a duet with a clarinet. It harkens back to the snare drum duet with the fife player. But it's done in a much more elegant, much more nuanced way, of course, because it's Rimsky-Korsakov doing it. But next time you hear Scheherazade and hear that third movement snare drum solo, think about the tradition and heritage of the snare drum and everything it went through to become something Rimsky-Korsakov could use in a very musical way. That's the short history of snare drumming. Bach never laid eyes on this instrument, a rosewood marimba, but today I'm going to play for you a piece by Bach on that instrument. Fugue in G minor from the first sonata for solo violin, only I adapted it for the marimba. Bach himself adapted this piece of music for an organ, he adapted it for a lute, it's played nowadays on a guitar, and it's had application over very many variety of different instruments. Interestingly enough, because it was written for a violin, playing it on a marimba does present its own set of challenges, but it's a masterpiece of beautiful music, and I'm happy to play it for you today. This is the Hungarian cymbalom. It's one of the largest hammer dulcimers. It has a complete pedal dampening system, fully chromatic, and it's Hungary's national instrument. Franz Liszt, the composer, in the mid-19th century was compiling his own list of all the native Hungarian instruments. And he would go into the villages and look for the peasants playing the instruments and compile these instruments. Well, he saw some Romani gypsies, and they were playing this cymbalom. He mistakenly thought that that cymbalom was a native Hungarian instrument. The Romani gypsies, however, had imported that instrument from Bohemia and the different performances that it was used in there. So it was never truly a Hungarian instrument, but it became known and totally associated with Hungarian music. Liszt himself wrote for it in the orchestra. Kodály used it in Har János Suite, a very famous piece for cymbalom. And even Igor Stravinsky used it. And Stravinsky was a great writer for the instrument, by the way. Something the Hungarian composers aren't always the best writers for the instrument. But it has a very unique timbre. It's a very special instrument. You don't see it a lot in America. My teacher played it, so he taught me how to play it. And I'm going to play for you today a little improvisation on it that kind of captures the tone and the style of the instrument. So it's just a little bit of improvisation to give you a flavor, a taste of the flavor of the music. Ioannis Xenakis is a 20th century composer. He just died about 10 years ago. Greek by birth, spent most of his time in Paris, very avant-garde composer, very interested in architecture and mathematics, and his music reflects this. This is a solo percussion piece called Rebon. It's in two sections, A and B. Today I'm just going to play B. And you can get a sense of the mathematical proportions that inform the composition of this piece of music. But beyond that, it has a lovely sense of structure and rhythm, and it's very tastefully composed, and it also has just a great rock sensibility to it, I think. He composed it for 5 skinheads and 5 wood blocks. And the skins I've chosen have been bongos, tuba, and then 2 drums. Michael Novak requested more cowbell, so I had to add a cowbell as well.